Today we are back with Rayne Watkin. Welcome.
Thank you.
Rayne is one of our yoga teachers at Brighton and Mordialloc, also a mama of 2 gorgeous little children and a fur mama.
Yes.
Of dogs, cats,
and fish.
All the animals. You have a zoo at your house.
Yeah, I'm into it.
And you're also an osteopath.
Yeah.
And we've had really great conversations on this podcast with you. Today we are diving into menopause and unpacking everything in relation to yoga and a little bit not in relation to yoga. I personally haven't gone through menopause, so this is going to be a really insightful conversation to me. I know a lot of our community are either going through it currently, you know, particularly in the Brighton studio. We have a lot of members that have talked to me personally and you personally about their experience and with yoga and the transitions. So I'm really looking forward, and I feel like if this is something that you're interested in, you're going to get a lot out of today's episode. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey and the stages of menopause.
I think I'm really grateful to be asked and I'm humbled to be asked back. But this topic, I think, is extremely important to make a conversation. And this really affected me. I went into menopause extremely young. So at 42, I was completely menopausal. I had stopped my period, dare I say those words out loud. Mm-hmm. And I would say that my body was going through the perimenopause period for quite a while before that stop. And this is where it's different for everybody and every body. So there's the stage of perimenopause when your body's starting to potentially have irregular periods. You might start to have some symptoms that will be irritating, like you're irritated all the time and you're like, what is wrong with me? I am so frustrated. I'm so fiery. Or you might start to have sleep disturbance. That's a really common one. And that has huge effects, obviously, because we got to keep going, right? Even though our body's saying, nah, you should be slowing down. And then besides just getting extremely hot at night, like the ongoing joke in my house, and I'm sure a lot of listeners will be able to relate to this, but when it started for me to sleep in the middle of winter, I'm like, do not close that window. And I'm like, legs are out, like I am so hot. And in the summertime, my husband's like, Jesus Christ, Rayne, like it's like a freezer box in here. And I'm like, don't you dare. Like I'll literally wake up from a silent sleep and I swear in my unconscious, I can feel the temperature change and I get so hot immediately. I'm like, do not shut that off. The amount of fights in the middle of the night. He's like, but it's freezing right. I'm like, okay, you can put more layers on your body and warm up, but I can't cool down. So it was lots of nighttime conversations that were a little bit heated in every single way.
Literally
so it really affects your ability to settle at night. That's just maybe too much of an overshare, but it's true. And the other thing that starts to happen is your weight. Your weight's going to change. You're potentially going to get constipated because your hormones are starting to go progesterone, estrogen imbalancing, because that's what we're talking about. When your body is starting to shift, your estrogen dominance will start to shift with progesterone. And so you'll get tired. The progesterone's your tiring hormone. And you'll get constipation as a result of that. So a lot of digestive issues might start. You might start having more intolerances to foods because of this, but you don't think about it. In your mind, you're not linking it with the change inside of you. You're just thinking something's wrong with you, but not really getting it.
Is that because it's happening quite gradually, like slowly?
For some, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know, like in the initial stages, one of the most common symptoms, I would say, observing my patient base and just having the conversation, quite frankly, is anxiety. A lot of heart palpitations in the middle of the night. Life is a lot, but I'm like, I think you might be going through change and maybe it's time to get your hormones checked, and they might still be in their late 30s and having a relatively regular period. So early menopause, like I said, could be a short window for some, or it could be a long, drawn out, arduous experience, meaning it could be 10 years of fluctuating bleeds, and it could be severe bleeds, long periods without a bleed at all, the amenorrhea, no period. So for women, you can't make an assumption. It really is so varied, and because we have different factors and stresses in our life, I know that's why it's varied. For me, this is my story. I went through IVF. That conversation meant that I inundated my body with a lot of hormones. And I know I'm not unique in the community that's probably going to be listening to this because you're interested, because some of you will be in this umbrella. I did it for a long time, and I had to always do a fresh cycle, which means I needed to pummel my body with a lot of hormones and a lot of stress to do that, right? So I was under adrenal load, adding a hormonal injection, and the defeat of time and time again not going through and having the outcome that I desired. So after my first child, I started having hot flashes, and my egg reserve, because we were harvesting my eggs, was extremely low. So my body was saying, it's time for you to stop. So it started to get hot at night. And then I, by a lot of miracles, and I won't go into that story, got my second child naturally on my last egg, ladies, my very last egg.
Wow.
I never had a period again. But I want to stress that in that stage between having my first child and my second, I ran a marathon. I ran a marathon within the year post-birth, which I shouldn't have done because I was already stressed going into having my daughter. But because I was in my 40s and I've always been an athlete, I still hadn't learned my lesson. I just went straight back to what I was before I was a mom. And the response is, I started to shut down. So I went into full-blown menopause at 42. That is extremely young. And that means up until 50, I'm at huge risk of heart disease and osteoporosis now.
Oh, wow.
And HRT didn't work for me. It really did not work for me. And I've tried a lot of different therapies, but that's not this conversation. But so I've naturally gone through this process without any intervention, although I've done it, Chinese medicine, a lot of great other things, but it's been an interesting period. There's still a bit of heat in me. I am post-menopause now, meaning I have stopped for over years now. 42 was my last flow. So I never had any breakthrough bleeds or anything. I was just done. But I know that I was done, and the reason why I was done the way I was is because I was really stressed. And I didn't do enough in those pre-menopausal period that was rejuvenating. I did so much to deplete myself. And so that's where the yoga practices can be really helpful. But I think most people will go through menopause with some symptoms, right? So this is the statistical breakdown. 25%, and I get to wear the t-shirt to be that 25%, yay. You're gonna have a lot of symptoms, and it's not gonna be an easy ride.
25%, just to clarify, are going to have
a lot
heightened symptoms.
Lots of symptoms. They're just gonna, everything in the book they're gonna have, and then maybe another 50% will have milder versions of the same story. I had the big bang, but more people have milder versions, and then there's gonna be this really beautiful group of souls out there. 25%, let's just put a number on it, that they're like, oh, it was easy, just cruised right on through. Great. But I guess I'm speaking to all of us, regardless of whether it was easy or hard, you can still manage it the same way and be more informed of how yoga or diet or lifestyle choices can help your transition not to be so tumultuous.
Yes. Can we clarify the 3 stages of menopause?
Yeah. So perimenopause, you start to get the changes in your period. Yeah. You start to get mood swings, you'll get hot. Fatigue is a really common one, so much so a lot of people will go and test for their iron, and they're going to find that their iron is low, but I'm still going to say, I think you need to check your hormones, because I think that I'd expect iron to be low, but I think there's something else going on. So don't just assume it's just iron. Once you find the iron tick and you're like, yeah, I feel much better, still get your hormones checked. That's my number one. Just get those hormones checked, ladies. Check, check, check. Make sure you know where you're at, because that is the biochemical feedback you need. But then when you're in menopause, you stop. Menarche stops. You don't have any breakthrough bleeds. You're done, you're done, you're done. It never comes back. It's done. And then post-menopause is that myriad of symptoms that can result because of the hormone changes in your body. Weight gain, right, girls? You get your little muffin top. There's a little extra layer on my 6-pack that now isn't a 6-pack anymore. It's just changed. And I look at it and I need to embrace my softness. We have to embrace the softness of menarche. It creates a softening of that hard strong, sinewy form. Doesn't mean that women out there that are postmenopausal aren't ripped. There's plenty out there, I've seen them. But that is not what the body actually should look like. And it is a softer body, and it's accepting that. You start to sag, don't you? you start to get what I'm starting to get. I get a little chicken dance under my chin, because the estrogen, the collagen starting to soften and sag, and your wisdom lines start to show up on your face.
Oh, wisdom lines.
Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes, I've got lots of them starting. And your hair will start to change color, but that's not relevant to menopause. That's, it's all going to happen. Yeah, I know 19-year-olds that have gone gray, so, that's not really a menopause conversation. But you're going to potentially get hair that will fall out. It will change in its texture. When you're pregnant, your hair will grow into thickness and then it sheds. So that's also what starts to happen, because you can go into baldness. You start to have softening of hair. These are all conversations. And so what I'm hearing myself even saying then, women will start to have potentially a difficult relationship with their body. And they'll start to be comparing what they can and can't do with what they see around them. And no one knows what's internally going on anyone else. And if you start to do that, then the compassion piece of transition is missing. Menopause is a cycle of life. It's a transition. It's a transition like the seasons, and you can go with the seasons and accept and change your clothing and change your lifestyle choices, or you can resist it the whole way and just create a really long period of discomfort as opposed to a time of transformation, which it has all of the capacity to be, because it's asking you to change. It doesn't mean you're not you anymore. It's just like, this is the cycle of life, and a lot of us aren't accepting that transition very gracefully, I would say. And so it's just this is where I'm at. And this is a conversation that I want to make normal so that women accept themselves for who they are and where they're on their journey. And if you're that one that's in perimenopause and it's going on for a long time and you're tired and exhausted and your husband says, oh, you're so hormonal, and, starts to have these conversations with you and you're just feeling a little bit less than you, then just slow down. Don't speed up. Stop putting yourself down and go, oh, I'm really tired today. Well, then maybe don't do what I did and run a marathon. Not smart. A smarter choice would have been doing yin classes. A smarter choice would have been taking walks instead of runs. A smarter choice would have been to just float in a salt bath, you know?
I can imagine a lot of these symptoms are very confronting, right? For me, I'm only 38, turning 39 this year. I'm not perimenopausal as far as I know, and hearing that is scary, but I think starting the conversation early is fantastic. I've heard from other women that I know that are close to me that have gone through this of some other symptoms are things like joint pain, brain fog, and low sex drive. Do you want to talk to those a little bit?
Shall we talk about it? Yes, let's. Yes. Joint pain, actually, we'll get that one out of the way. I know the sex drive got everyone tweaked
excited
out there. Everyone's like, yes, let's talk about low libido. Joint pain actually is a really interesting one, because clinically, a lot of women will suddenly get joint pain, and it will be maybe both sides, which could be pushed into this, you have a rheumatoid or an autoimmune condition, but it's hormonal. Your back and your pelvis will start to hurt, potentially, if that is your predilection. So that's part of that inflammatory conversation, because the hormones are out. So don't just assume it could be hormonal. So you need to address the hormonal system as much as the stress system of your body. But the other one was that brain fog. I did a conversation, I have conversations with people even to this day, and I'm apparently through it. And I'm having a conversation and I'm just looking at the person who's like brain dead. Like there's just nothing there. And I'm just thinking, I've got no idea what I was just talking about. I was just talking and no one on the outside will notice, but inside there's nothing. I literally have no connection. Maybe it's exhaustion, but I have no connection to what I'm saying. And that's the brain fog. You will literally have less memory. Your capacity for memory is less. So start writing stuff down. That's a really good trick. Get into that habit. That's good for brain retention and brain health anyway.
Yeah, it is. And I think the stats is you've got 30% more chance of remembering it if you write it down.
100%. So just write it. It could be in notes in your phone, or you're actually physically writing to create that pathway. But that is a hormonal blip and it happens all the time. time. Mummies out there will know that post having babies, if they've had it, yes, fatigue causes brain fog too. And it can be a blanket statement I'm making that can relate to a lot of different factions of society. But it definitely is a characteristic that can make you feel stupid. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, like, what am I even talking about sometimes? It's part of that conversation of being hard on yourself, and it's not compassionate. It's like, oh, little brain fog. I need to start getting back into my vitamins, perhaps go see my naturopath, just make sure that my baseline minerals are okay, that I can control to make myself feel better. But let's talk about sex drive, right? That's a big one. And this is really close to home for me because that was my biggest menopausal, around my menopause, no sex drive. Love my husband to death, nothing. And it's got nothing to do with anything but me. My hormones just are like, I'm done. But if you think back to what I told you of my story, it makes a lot of sense. Yes, the estrogen progesterone change in your blood will decrease your sex drive potentially. But a lot of people can take HRT and everything is just ticking along. You'll get some vaginal dryness, girls, and you might have to lubricate and all the things. These are bigger conversations than this one. But the fact that I had none had everything to do with the fact that I was so empty. I was so tired, and I'm still using all of my techniques to fill my cup because I was giving so much from my overflow, from my emptiness. I was giving from my emptiness to be a mom. I was giving. And that's not unique to me. I know there's people out there that can relate to that, but it's that undeniable fatigue and how your relationship with your sexuality probably is going to change, because when you're young, it just takes nothing to get fired up, right? It's just like, put on some music, get your your candles lit, you're having good times, right?
Yeah, it can be just a thought, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't take much at all.
It's like wakey. But when you're going through menopause, and I hope I'm going to be hanging out here by myself, but you're just like, yeah, no. Like, turn the other way. No, I have nothing. And it's kind of a conversation that's hard in marriages and relationships. And so you don't know how hard it is at home because of their menopause. Menopause is affecting their entire life potentially, so it's a very real conversation, and how to make it not, there's something wrong with you because you have no libido. Because for men, it's not as quick, but it does happen. Their libido changes for sure, but it's not the same for women, I don't think. And I can't speak for men, and maybe someone will come on and have a discussion about that for men, because I think it's an important conversation too, because there's stigma. You've got to be virile, so you always have to be high libido, but there might be men doing a lot of acting out there and having their own issues with that, right? So
for sure.
I don't want to make assumptions. But menopause and sex drive for me is an ongoing challenge, and I guess it's the way that love matures, just like your body changes. I think it's about realizing that we don't need to go through the act of making love with our partner. Maybe it's just being in each other's presence and just being seen. That's what fills our cup now. It changes, and that's not really gratifying an answer, I'm sure, for a whole lot of people out there. But it's like just looking and just touching each other might be enough, because otherwise it starts to become a monster.
Yes.
I had a student come and talk to me really big heart to heart about it, and I fully related. It's just like, just be compassionate with yourself. Your body is going through a change, and your partner needs to be compassionate to it as well, and not reprimand you for what is a natural change in your life. We're not meant to have kids, so our body's not putting that fire in us to procreate. So we're here to help.
I really like that perspective.
Yeah, it's just different. And if you kind of just take the pressure off the pressure valve, I bet you there might be a little flame lit. But until the conversation is had in their individual homes, it will become a pressure, and it's the unspoken pressure and the unspoken conversation, which I hope this will create one. Yeah,
yes, and I like that concept of intimacy just looks a little bit different. Just like long-term relationships evolve.
Love changes.
It changes. Yeah, I love that. So if somebody's listening to right now and they're feeling those symptoms potentially. You mentioned HRT, which
hormone replacement therapy. So Technically, my endocrinologist said to me, until you're 50, you need to be on something. Because I was 42, you're going to have to take something. You have increased risk of heart disease and you have increased risk of osteoporosis because you're not taking anything for your body. And like I have already alluded to, I tried, it didn't work for me. I'm doing other things and I'm just making sure that I'm doing the activities that help me maintain density and be healthy through my diet and my choices and lifestyle. I don't get it right every day, don't get me wrong, but I'm trying, and...
Does everybody that's going through menopause take HRT?
That's a personal choice.
It's a personal choice.
I would say that's a very personal choice. I know if I put my medical hat on, like my endocrinologist said to me, you should be taking something till you're 50 because of the increased risk. It's interesting though, because I would imagine, I don't know the statistics to give them to you verbatim at the moment, but I would imagine that the average age of menopause is lowering. I'm gonna put it out there, and I'm happy for someone to knock me down, but I'm observing that changes are happening a little bit quicker, just like little girls are starting to get their periods earlier, so it's pushing the envelope. You only have you were born with so many eggs. You had the eggs that you were inside of your grandmother, and then you were inside your mom, and those eggs are all inside of you. They were all there. That was it. That was all you're gonna get, and you don't get any more.
Isn't that wild?
I think it's so beautiful, and I love that connection with the grandmother line. But it's just, that's it. That's all you have. And once it's out, it's out. So, and some people are, drop a lot of eggs during cycles, and, a lot of gynecological issues, endometriosis, of which I can put my hand up for that one as well. Type A, very driven woman. Endometriosis over here. It's in my family line. Every single woman in my family had their uterus removed really early. And I'm the only one that still has it. And I'm the one that went through early menopause too, right? So my mom I think she did a very short period of HRT, but she's fine. Like her bone density is really good and she hardly does anything. So it's genetic too, right? Like every life is a little bit of a roll of the die and the genetics that you get. But it doesn't mean that you should rely on them either, right? So you've got to take your menopause into your hand and have a lot of compassion for that transition and stop trying to be anything than what you are. Yeah.
So how do you feel yoga supports perimenopausal and going through menopause, and what types of yoga do you think are supportive, or postures specifically, if you have any?
If you're in perimenopause, like I said, some of you won't even know, and you're just going to carry on as per usual. Good on you. I'm not bitter about you, 25%.
I'm secretly hoping I'm that small 25%.
And I wish that for you too.
Yes, let's fingers crossed.
But those of us that get a little bit of sign are ahead of the game because we know we're going through it and we're not missing it. And so this is a chance to go, okay, during this period, I need to start to slow it down instead of keep up revving at the same level. So when you're starting to feel really high levels of fatigue, as opposed to just doing another movement class, like we discussed in our first podcast about mixing it up, get in some more yin classes, do more restorative poses. The symptoms that we've talked about are brain fog. The number one pose I would say to stop brain fog is down dog. It's so clarifying for the mind. So if you could do a down dog, woof, medicine right there.
Because it's a gentle inversion?
A gentle inversion, and it just creates this clarity. And if you add centralizing your awareness into your spine while you're there, then the mind's like a magnet and you just become extremely calm. It's a beautiful posture and anyone can do it. There's some people that might have wrist injuries because they have joint pain, because they have perimenopausal symptoms, don't know why. All of a sudden I've got lots of joint pain and I haven't broken any bones to explain it. Well, then you just come down onto your forearms and you modify, but still use a gentle inversion. The other ones are gentle back bends, supported, like butterfly pose, Supta Baddha Konasana, feet together, knees wide, lie back. You can put a bolster under your back, so restorative. And you can do that in flow classes as well. You can use blocks, just lifting, just a gentle lift of the heart, right? Really great. Why? Because it gives you a space to just soften. Like I said, we need to soften into menopause. Softening. Our body, our life needs to start softening. And most of us are fighting the softening because we're stuck in the outer world, and the inner world has a different conversation now. And if we're not honoring that inner conversation, well, we're in this constant fight. There's forward folds. Well, anyone that's been in a class with me knows I will bang on about the medicinal benefits of the forward fold. If you do nothing else in life, just fold forward because it calms the brain. It's so medicinal. You know, in Chinese medicine, it's the bladder meridian. It has a direct gateway into your brain. So it's so calming. So forward folds like Janu Shirshasana, head to knee pose, they're all great. Add support, it makes it the softening. So there's your yin practice. So in your more slow flow, perhaps over vinyasa, start to add a little slow flow in. Just a little more time to breathe, a little bit more time to cool down, because remember what I said, heat. There's heat happening. The amount of women I see having a hot flash, I've had someone pass out in a class because maybe it had too much change in blood pressure. And that
which up and down
movement, which is what that is.
Yeah.
Sun salutes are a lot of up and down, and that's great for your heart. But when you're already heart weak because you're anxious, that's when anxiety starts to happen. It starts to make you feel unsafe, so you start to feel a little bit unsure, and then you try and keep up as opposed to slow down, then that person can get quite spinny. So it's like more pauses in class. That's why slow flows could be the better option. I'm not saying you don't do vinyasas, but it's just balance, just saying. The heat in the room can accentuate it. And so that's why the cooling practices of yin are really good for people that particularly are going through a really hot phase, because they go up and down too. But if you're in a really hot phase and it's summer outside and you're hot inside your physical temple, and then you go into a hot practice, you're not going to sleep that night. No, you're not. You're going to be super hot because you just created more fire.
More heat. Yes.
So it doesn't mean you can't be in a heated room, but I know you're going to be the one that's irritated in it. And so you need to listen to that. Maybe you should have done a cooler class that day, but you could add cooling breath, like that Shitali breath where you breathe in through your mouth and out through your nose. So cooling. So you could add that into your movement practice if you're having a hot day and you're starting to feel a little bit hot. Or what's the obvious answer? Go into your child's pose, down dog, lie in your belly, take a break. And don't reprimand yourself for doing it. It's really important. You can still go to the same classes, but just listen to the inner world more than the outer.
With the breath that you just demonstrated, is that recommended versus doing Ujjayi breath?
Well, it depends. It's always shades of gray, right? Ujjayi breath, if it's done properly, and I would say people start with Ujjayi, but it goes in the middle of a glass, right? But it's
Do you
not
want to clarify
cooling.
what it is?
Ujjayi is the victorious breath. So it's like fogging on a glass with your mouth open. Inhale through your nose. Do the same thing with your mouth closed. In through the nose. It creates that oceanic sound. It's like that pushing and pulling at the back of your throat. But it should be quite quiet. Now, we have heard people in class probably where you're very aware that they're breathing because they're trying to do the right thing, but it actually can make you hotter. It can actually make you more agitated because it's dealing with your vagus nerve, and your vagus nerve doesn't need to be pummeled with your breath. Like, it needs to be, you don't want to be that, but you want that subtle whispering of breath that only you can hear. But it's that gentle Ujjayi, that victorious breath, that oceanic breath, whatever terminology lands for you, because every way, it's cued in all three ways. But it can be cooling if it's slow and quiet. That's personal. I can't say it's helpful or not for somebody if they don't do it that way.
Right, but then if you potentially overheated, you're overstimulated in class, and potentially move to the other breath technique, which is in through the mouth, in through the mouth,
cooling, and out through the nose
versus in through the nose, out through the nose, just to clarify.
Yeah. And you might do a little bit of both in a practice, but I guess I'm offering that as particularly in the summertime, ladies, you'll want to do the cooling breath. In the middle of the night when you wake up, that's when you could do some of that breathing. Yeah. It's quite a hot time. So it's important. But the other category I would say is the inversions. So we discussed down dog because of its clarifying of the mind and the calming, but putting your legs up and draining also dissipates heat. So any inversion, supported, shoulder stand, Headstand can have a heating aspect, but anything that's supported is fair game. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. I can already hear people out there going, but I like doing my headstand. You can still be in perimenopause, menopause, and do it. But just don't always do it, I guess, is the conversation.
Yes, listening in, right? Like you said earlier, making sure that you're listening. What about vinyasa? Even though it can be heated and Warrior One is heated, we aim to get the room around 25 degrees. I know that people that are perimenopausal or menopausal come and they either practice near an open window or potentially not directly under the heat. But I know that vinyasa classes can still be good for some of these symptoms in regards to strength. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I guess this kind of ekes into the conversation about osteoporosis, which I alluded to can be a link with menopause. It also can be a genetic predisposition, right? So genetically, some people have earlier onset of bone weakening. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the demineralization of your bone, which can lead to fractures, doing the most benign things sometimes for people that are more brittle in their bones. This is a process that can happen over time. It's not like it's overnight, but I do have more and more patients coming and students coming to me saying, I've just been diagnosed with osteoporosis or osteopenia, which is the step before osteoporosis. And it's a really big flag of time to listen. And so when you're doing classes for vinyasa or in any of the classes, you got to start watching how much you're folding your spine. So that means you can't go into deep forward folds. You have to go into half folds because you do not want too much spinal flexion and too much spinal extension. You don't want too much twisting. You can do it all, but really modified. And the reason why this is coming into the conversation of menopause, because osteoporosis, osteopenia requires balance and stability to stimulate the bone through contraction of musculature. So you should be moving. So my beautiful student that came and asked me about osteoporosis, and I said, oh, you might need to start changing, not going to her favorite class every day, which is yin. And I said, well, I hate to say it, but you might start to have to go for your walks and things, but maybe do a slow flow, but you're going to have to modify the degree of your spinal movement. And the doctors are usually wording up their patients about it. So they're coming in saying, my doctor told me. And I said, yes. But there's always a way to support it and find a way in, and also to give you permission to take breaks as you need, and that's your new flow. So you're more upright in your twists, they're more gentle, you're not working to extreme ranges of motion, but you've got to do stabilization and stability work. So for osteoporosis, an example. You can't come into that deep forward fold that I said was so calming. It's like, but Rayne, you just said it was so calming, like, what am I supposed to do? I can't do it. I got osteoporosis. So I'm going to say you're going to get that bolster and you're going to really be quite upright, but you still have the tendency to tuck your chin gently, and that will be enough of a fold, right? That works. You can still do that. Or allow it to come the other way around. Lie on your back and draw your knees into your chest, but not too tight. So you don't want to flex too much, because the spine is one of the biggest areas where you're going to get it. A lot of people get in their hips too, don't forget. So that whole apparatus needs to just be modified and supported more. What else? When you're doing a standing posture like Warrior 3, which is airplane pose, your one leg is back, your body's forward, and you're flying, you would probably start with your back foot on the ground, don't lift it up. And you're still getting the benefit of contraction and stability, still in the flow of a class, but modifying it for your tendency to need stability and balance, because we do not want you to fall and break anything. We don't want you unstable in your yoga class.
So you're saying you don't want to come into your full extension or flexion, right? So moving
definitely
the spine.
not.
So I always think of it like
if you're osteoporotic,
Yeah, if you're osteoporotic or have osteoporosis, I always think of it like a credit card, right? You're bending it back and forth, and eventually it's going to snap if you keep doing that. So what percentage range should you stay in for people that maybe are need a little bit more of a
visual? I mean, I'm not inside their body.
Yes.
But I would say if 100% is a full flat pancake fold over, which most people can't do anyway, so they're already probably at 75%. So let's talk from 75%. That's the average person. 70%, their knees are bent, like nothing straight. This is the real person on the mat. then I would say go 25% less. Even if you can do more, try and not round. Keep your spine a little straighter and your heart a little bit more proud than folding in is what I would really say would be a great cue. You don't want to be too much into extension either, right? So you don't want too much of a back bend to approximate your spine, but you just want enough stimulation that the back line of the body is creating that activation into the skeleton and therefore has a medicinal effect of slowing down the degradation of the spine. I did a master's study when I was studying osteopathy, and it was actually on rheumatoid or autoimmune conditions and different modalities. And the number one thing that helped people was joint movement over massage, over hydrotherapy, which are very good, by the way. Do them if you have osteoarthritis. It's still really, really good, or any of the rheumatoid conditions. But it was joint movement. And this is joint play that a practitioner would mobilize joints, but you moving your joints is how you move your energy. We know that prana, chi collects in joints. So if you are not loading it, you should be passively moving your joints all the time. That's why yoga is good.
Yes. So taking your joint through its range of motion in that lesser degree.
Correct. But always moving your joints, fingers, everything. Like grab the tune-up balls in classes. That's a really great range of motion for the fingers as opposed to the closed fist. Use the tune-up ball analogy. So it's still getting range, but it's not really tight. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's a lot of, it depends is the answer, but you've got to watch those forward folds and extensions primarily, particularly when we're starting to have that osteoporosis conversation, osteopenia prevention. And most people know, and their body is going to stop them because it hurts. It's very uncomfortable.
Bone on bone.
Yeah, well, that's osteoarthritis is bone on bone. Osteoporosis is the bone itself is becoming brittle. And so we just need to make sure that you're doing the restorative practices. So if I was going to put my yin hat on, Chinese medicine, bone is your kidneys. Kidneys is your chi source. It's where your vitality is. And so if you are not filling your cup with rest and restoration, then the bones have more predilection towards the weakening on top of obviously the genetics and on top of the hormonal conversation. So control the controllables. Hot room, cool breath. Obviously, putting yourself by a window, great idea. If you've already done a lot of work that day, like outside of the walls of the shala, then choose the yin class or the slow flow. Take breaks, modify your practice. Don't judge yourself. Be compassionate. Yoga is a compassionate practice. It's not judging you. That's you judging you. And so use that very, very sacred space in the way that it's meant. It's being compassionate to yourself, not just for what you used to be, but what you're becoming. And that is a transition that menopause is part of that conversation. You're becoming wise. You're becoming someone that no longer needs to prove themselves. And you can finally accept yourself for who you are, unless you're still stuck in the old patterns. And that's what's creating the difficulty of the transition between the beginning, the middle, and the end of that end life transition.
I mean, menopause or no menopause, I think we all could be a little bit more compassionate towards ourselves.
Definitely.
So what about time and duration? Like I know it's hard because it's probably going to depend on each individual. So did you want to talk a little bit around expectations of that?
In terms of class or how long it would take?
The duration of menopause.
Well, I mean, that is how long is a piece of string, and everyone's going to be different. For me, young, 42. Perimenopausal, I had my symptoms starting, I would say 36, 42 done. That's pretty quick. I have others that are they started their symptoms.
That's 6 years.
Yeah, that's quick. Yeah, to go from starting to have symptoms to stopping to being post. I'm on the other side.
Oh, 6 years for the whole cycle.
Yeah, I'm through it, like I'm on it. But it's a constant changing because your body still starts to degenerate, right? Because that's the changing that's happening, and it's you can slow it down through mindfulness and breathing. But it's this process that can start as early. I'd say I've seen an anomaly of someone that was in their late 20s start to show symptoms of change because of things that went on in their life. So that's why it's confusing. But the timeline before the stopping or the cessation of the bleed can be, like I said, maybe 1 or 2 years. It could be 10 years. Girls, you that are out there and feeling me on this one, it's a long journey, and sometimes you feel like it's never going to end, but it will, and I promise everything changes. But it can be that long. In our society, this is when you're making your money. This is where you're making your mark in life, right? And this is also when your body's saying, slow the hell down, right? So that's why it's hard. But menopause, once it hits, it's done. So it's all about how you move into it, how you prepare to get into menopause, I suspect, is the bigger conversation. So is someone that's getting a quicker transition a healthier person? We can't make that assumption.
Yeah.
But they might have made different choices. They might have better genes. But I would say those that are struggling a little longer might be a bit more stressed. And if there's people out there listening and had a reflection, that might be relevant. It was for me, and I'm not saying I'm everybody. But if I was totally honest, and I don't know any other way to be, quite frankly.
We love your honesty.
Tick, tick, tick. Yeah, I've got the t-shirt on that one as well. I've got lots of t-shirts. So menopause, it comes, but it's the after. And I think the after is till your last breath. And I feel more confident about who I am on the flip side. It doesn't mean I still don't have the fire. I sometimes do get hot and I have to watch. Definitely got to watch your caffeine. You definitely don't want to have a caffeine before a vinyasa class because you're going to create fire on fire. And a lot of people do. They're going in to get their coffee before, right?
I see it physically. People are literally all day walking in with the coffee. Yeah.
So if that's you and you're perimenopausal, no caffeine before your practice. None. Yoga Nidra, definitely not. It'll wreck your practice. But you definitely don't want that. And you don't want to eat late. It's going to create another unsettling. Alcohol unsettles you, creates heat in the body. So there's things that you can do intelligently to not affect your practice and your sleep. But it's the wisdom that comes from on the other side is just that, I don't know, it's not talked about, and I'd love to create a conversation around it for people that are on the other side like myself, because I spent my whole pre-menopause period, premenstrual period, menstrual period time, very anxious and completely shy. Very shy chick. I would hardly talk to anyone. I can't even, if I told my younger me, look at you now, look, you're standing here talking or sitting here on a podcast, like I'd be laughing at you.
Oh, really?
I was so shy, I wouldn't actually go up to anyone and ask them for help. I was bone shy, like so shy.
Oh, that really surprises me.
Yeah, and everyone always says that. And I'm really good one-on-one, but you put me in a room, even to this day, I'm not good in a room with a group of people, because that's my predilection. But I am so much better on the other side of menopause. It's just like, I don't care. I just don't care anymore. I don't care what anyone thinks. All I care about is what I think. If I can feel good about the choices I've made and the person that I am, and that I can go to sleep at night grateful that I am happy. I think it becomes a little less complicated on the other side. It's just like, oh God, I got my period. I can't do this. I can't do that. It's like, well, that's not a factor. I don't have to worry about my mood swings as much, although I'm sure my husband might still say they're there a little bit. But I mean, come on. Everyone swings. We're all swingers. Men do it too. They have their own menopause. For sure.
They do.
For sure they do.
It's like man flu.
It's, 100%. 100%.
Every woman listening to this is like, yes, man flu. So ridiculous.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. Bless. But on the other side is wisdom. And on the other side, you start channeling something that was always there. I actually think it was always there. It's just I got out of my own way, and now it's just me with me, and that's it. And I know that that's not unique.
That's beautiful.
I think that that's something to look forward to. So ladies, hang in, because it's coming.
Yeah,
it's coming for you.
Because you did scare us all with all those symptoms. So that's nice to see that there's a silver lining.
But you don't have to have all those symptoms. Like I said, there's a lot of things you can do naturally. Yoga does help. It does help.
Yes. And don't you think, what I've seen in the studios is a lot of people come to yoga later in life because they have been practicing Pilates or strength training, which are great and something I personally love, but their body starts to break down a little bit. You start getting a little bit more niggly injuries, or your doctor says you need to go and take a little bit more of a restorative kind of practice or a less intense practice of movement. And so I feel like that is quite a big demographic of people that move to yoga and that come to Warrior One that are moving into that phase of life.
Yeah. And it's great. There's no time like the present. So you might as well start. But I guess you have to realize that your body is not as agile. And so it just always comes back to that same conversation though. Know where you're at physically before you enter any physical activity domain. It doesn't matter if it's yoga, it doesn't matter if it's gym or swimming. You still have to honor your cardiovascular capacity and your musculoskeletal. And don't go, I can't, do this and I can't do that. Well, what can you do? And just work within the comforts of what that is for you. But that also takes less ego, right? And when you're first coming into something new, you're always going to have ego because you want to do it well and you want to do it right. And that's going to be that I don't care what age you are. That's the way it is for us all. It's just we don't talk about it because we're just like, yeah, I want to get this. I want to understand it. So we're not feeling it. And that's the injury time, right? Because they're trying to understand it. They're not feeling what's going on in the practice because there's just too much to think about. It's like I had the teacher saying, relax your shoulders, extend your arms, take a breath, tuck your pelvis. Like you're just like, holy hell, like, all right. And then you're like, and then they're like, now just relax. And you're like,
how can I relax?
But I have to tuck my tail and extend my arm, like we've all had that, right? What's my back foot doing? I don't know. So that's why the injuries happen in the beginning. And I guess that's the only thing I'd like to add to that conversation because it's not yoga that caused the injury. It was the lack of safety that you created for yourself and your body in that moment. That is not saying that it's not the teacher's responsibility to observe the room, respond, and give options. I am not saying that at all. But that's such an easy way to blame someone for your experience that only you know inside yourself. Unfortunately, no matter how incredible the teacher is, and there are so many amazing ones, they're not inside your body on that day, in that moment. It might have been different the day before. You might have done something in the garden and you came in sore from your low back and then you decided, oh, I thought this would help. But it's probably the worst thing you could have done because you jarred your back, did yoga, back gave out. It's the yoga class, not the gardening, right? Anyone out there hear me? Yeah.
Amen.
It's a thing. Oh yeah. So you just have to honor and keep it simple. So when someone's starting to come into a class and they're in older, and that means there's an increased chance for injury because of the fact that you have less muscle density, muscle mass. That's why you're vulnerable, regardless of the class. It means when a teacher gives a cue, only listen to one of them. Don't listen to multiple. Choose one, stick to one, focus on that, and then breathe. I think that's a safer way to approach it. Yeah. But anyone can start, but I would start yin, slow flow, and then maybe some vinyasa.
Yes.
If you're feeling fiery.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm so grateful to have had this conversation and thank you for sharing so openly and vulnerably. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Pleasure.
If there's any last words of wisdom you'd like to end on, please let us know because I'm sure women listening to this are relating on so many levels.
Well, I do hope this gave this conversation more breadth and space to be had in community because wisdom is shared in a circle, as I always say. But it's a conversation that needs to become discussed. Perhaps the yoga world needs to create more yoga-specific classes or workshops around it. I think that's something maybe here at Warrior One we can start to put together an education on how to manage these particular really common experiences for people that no one's talking about. But what I truly hope is that I've given you that vignette into my life that allowed you to reflect into your own and given you the wisdom to move forward with grace. Be compassionate to yourself. Yoga is a temple of compassion, and it all starts on the inside. And if you're feeling lost in your life, then it's going to express in your body and you're going to try and get ahead of it. So accept where you're at. Give yourself breaks when you need breaks. Modify as you need. Ask for help. And enjoy life. Life doesn't stop. I'm telling you, it's just beginning.
Yoga is a temple of compassion. Oh, it doesn't get much sweeter than that. Thank you so much.
Oh, pleasure, babe.